Matthew Broderick has been acting in movies for nearly 40 years, and he's been in many recognizable roles, such as Glory, The Lion King, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, You Can Count on Me, and Election. And actually, he was on an episode of the American version of Who Do You Think You Are, where they talked about his father's side of the family. And what Matthew Broderick found out was that one of his ancestors fought in the Civil War, and they went through all these documents and showed him these records. But what you may not know is that Matthew Broderick's mother's side is Jewish. And what we do here on Genealogy is Fun is when we have an instance like this, we will trace the mother's maternal line. So that means on this episode, we're going to be trying to get back as far as we can on his mother's, etc. This one was especially rewarding because, as you're going to see, I was able to get a number of generations back on this line. And make sure you stay to the end of the video because I have something really incredible, a different topic that happened to come up in the research that I want to talk about with his line. I'm Yona Paley and I believe genealogy is fun. Today we're going from the 1960s all the way back to the 1750s and earlier to try to trace Matthew Broderick's matrilineal ancestry as far as we can. Matthew Broderick was born in 1962 in New York City to James Broderick, an actor, and Patricia Beau, a painter and playwright. And like her son, Patricia was also born in New York and was raised into a very affluent family, along with her brother Richard. As you can see on the US federal census, at one point her family had a live-in nurse, maid, and cook. And this was because her father was an advertising executive. So Patricia's father, who was definitely more famous, was named Milton Beau. But we're not talking about his line, we're talking about her mother, who was named Sophie Amalie Dattelbaum. And folks, this was by far the most difficult part of this entire research project, was figuring out what her original maiden name was, and I'm going to show you why. On Wikipedia, Sophie's mother is listed with the maiden name Taub, as well as in all of the censuses going all the way back to 1905. But I noticed that in the 1910 US federal census, that the mother, Miriam, or Millie, that it said that she was in the present marriage from the year 1903, which was very odd because Sophie and most of her siblings were born in the 1890s. So immediately I suspected that Miriam was married once before. This turned out to absolutely be the truth, and through using a combination of the birth date of Sophie along with the marriage records of her mother, I discovered that she had formerly been married to a guy named Selke Dattelbaum, and that he had either died or divorced her before the year 1900, because on the 1900 US federal census, you can see Miriam or Millie Dattelbaum living with her 3 children, Bella, Sophie, and Harry Dattelbaum. Miriam's marriage certificate says that she was from Krakow, Poland, and sometimes in genealogy you just need one really good lead to just blow the roof wide open, and in this instance it turns out that Krakow, being the second largest city in Poland, has a huge amount of records available online for it. So I was able to take the knowledge of her being from this town and take this tree back extremely far. She was born in 1864 to Hirsch Schneider and Bela Nacha Spitzer, who had at least 4 other children. Bela Nacha was born in 1823 to Joseph Spitzer or Fisher and Malka Lerner. Now, Joseph's name on various documents says Fisher and Spitzer, and keep that in mind because that's going to come up later. Thanks to Joseph and Malka's 1818 marriage record, we can see that her parents were Israel Lerner and Rachel, daughter of Label, and the couple had at least 3 other children. But it doesn't end there because Israel and Rachel's 1798 marriage record is also available online. And it reveals her parents to have been Label, son of Kalman, and Fagel, daughter of Isaac. I was shocked, but Label and Fagel show up in a 1795 Krakow census, where, as it turns out, they were probably born around the 1750s or 1760s. While it's no longer the maternal line, we know that Fagel's father was named Isaac, and because Fagel was born around the 1750s, that means that her father, Isaac, was probably born in the 1730s or earlier, which means that for an Ashkenazi Jewish family, we have gone back almost 300 years in the records, which is just nuts. Now, remember when I told you at the beginning of this episode to watch all the way to the end? Well, that is because I found an even older document, a 1790 census, and it actually reveals something really fascinating about this family. So the census, which is featured on the Krakow Kahila links page, once again features a label written here as Levek or Levi or something like that. But the census doesn't list the daughter Rachel, but it does, however, list their son Itzik. And what it says is that Itzik took on the last name Fisher. So that means that Itzik Fisher was Matthew Broderick's 4th great-granduncle. I decided to try to trace Isaac or Itzik back to see whether there were any descendants alive from this family. And what I found out is that Isaac Fisher married a woman named Bela, and they had a son named Joseph Fisher. Joseph Fisher or Spitzer. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might remember that Joseph Fisher or Spitzer married Malka Lerner. So what does this mean? We have 2 cousins who married each other. And what that indicates is something called pedigree collapse. So what is pedigree collapse? Well, on most family trees, you have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, and so on and so on. But let's say that 2 cousins marry each other. Well, you've effectively reduced the number of total ancestors that you can have in any given generation. Usually you have 128 fifth great-grandparents, but the maximum number of fifth great-grandparents that Matthew Broderick can have is 126. And this is because Label and Fagel are his ancestors twice on 2 different lines, both in the same generation. Now, pedigree collapse isn't super uncommon among people living in Poland around this time period, but I did think it was really cool to find it in people who were born so long ago, in like the 1770s or 1780s. So thank you so much to all the incredible record indexers and translators who managed to make this work, to be able to find people born so long ago and still be able to discover an instance of pedigree collapse. And that wraps up this episode. If you liked it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel. As always, I'm looking forward to bringing you more videos as well as tips and tricks that you can use in your own genealogy research. So thank you so much for watching, make sure to subscribe, and we'll get you next time.